The Minnesota Vikings select.
He's a longtime NFL draft expert who's been sweating Vikings football since the Randy Moss era.
Straight cash, homie.
Welcome to Thor Talks Purple.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Thor Talks Football. I'm, of course, Thor Nystrom, joined by AJ Frederickson. Today is our Monday episode, so we're going to be recapping yesterday's game. Might not be the funnest thing, AJ, but we're going to get deep into this thing for the inaugural voyage of Thor Talks Purple.
Oh my God, yeah, Thor, yesterday, it felt like watching a car crash over and over and over, and then you took a halftime, and then we came back. It was just an abysmal showing on offense. I know it's the first shutout for the Vikings since 2007, so let's just get right into it. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. What were your thoughts? Because offense yesterday, it stalled out. You saw Max Brosmer getting his first career start. And after a week, that kind of felt like behind the scenes, you got this hype train of coaches and front office people maybe saying like he's super capable. And it felt like that was the broadcasters' understanding too from talking to people behind the scenes with the Vikings. And then what we saw, a 4-interception performance, a terrible passer rating, like just a brutal day offensively for the Vikings.
Yeah, all systems meltdown. And you had sort of the greatest hits of what we've seen all season. You had your poor quarterback play. You had an offensive line that was imploding. You had receivers dropping balls. You had wonky play calling that you couldn't really explain, like our rollout on 4th and 1 with our undrafted rookie quarterback that doesn't have any mobility. Just all kinds of wonkiness, the greatest hits, and it leads to the worst offensive showing of the season. You know, you didn't really think it could get worse, but it certainly could. Brosmer ends up 19 of 30 for 126 yards and 4 interceptions, and became the first quarterback making his first start to throw 4+ interceptions in a game since Nathan Peterman. Maybe not the best company to be in for Brosmer, but AJ, to your point, you know, it's interesting. You know, we've had a season here with the Vikings, obviously a crushingly disappointing one, where there's been weird stuff going on, and you hear kind of weird comments, and the Brosmer hype that the broadcasters were sort of getting into was another sort of thing that's indicative of that, where, you know, it was a Greg Olsen that was like, oh, you know, I've been hearing great things, and, you know, all this different stuff, and sort of hyping up Brosmer, and this is going to be different. You know, they were sort of describing him as this sort of anti-McCarthy, but in this very positive way, seemingly from what he had heard from someone inside the organization. And then, and by the way, Josh McCown's brother was also texting out the day before, like, Brosmer's going to do great. He's going to play great, you know, all this different stuff. And then you see what happens there. The media's reporting of some of the comments they're hearing from inside the building, I continue to just find it bizarre. You know, we almost need to, instead of Thor Talks Purple, maybe we need to start this as an investigation podcast, like a 10-part series where we find the moles within the Vikings. CSI Minnesota. We'll get inside the building. We'll try to figure out where the leaks are coming from in the organization. I think some are going to be plugged. We are going to have firings. I'm curious if we get any today. I'm curious if we get any releases today. You know, this could be the first day where you start to see a little bit of shaking up. But obviously, just a terrible, terrible performance from the Vikings. Almost unwatchable.
It feels, I mean, the fan side of me yesterday kind of feels like I've been slapped in the face by the front office, because all season long, and this goes back to the off season where you part ways with Sam Darnold, you part ways with the Daniel Jones, and I think the wording and similar to what we experienced this week with Brosmer, but they felt they identified a readiness level at the QB position this season where they could allocate so much of that salary cap to the offensive line, to the defensive side of the ball, to places other than quarterback. And obviously, J.J. McCarthy didn't start at all last year. He's now played 6 games, 2 of which he's gotten hurt in. So it's not like we really have a huge sample size on who he can be or who he's going to be. We've seen some good. We've also seen a lot of bad, but Vikings fans, like, is there any reason for them today to just not feel like they've kind of gotten slapped by this front office, just lied to in the sense of they kind of mapped out where they thought this would be, and this has gone from conversations of this team is NFC Championship bound, this is a Super Bowl year for a team with a not a rookie quarterback, but essentially a rookie quarterback making next to nothing, to now you're heading into week 14, you have 4 wins. Like, this is about as bad as it could have been from where we came from in the offseason.
Yeah, you on the one hand, you had all the miscalculations that were made in free agency, where this roster that was constructed that was supposed to pull up the young quarterback or young quarterbacks, bringing Brosmer into it from yesterday, and instead, it's sort of done the opposite. I don't want to say it's conspired against it, because certainly the quarterback play hasn't helped, but the rest of the roster has not been as advertised as well. Defensively played a little bit better, and we'll talk about the defense. The defense actually played really well yesterday, but those free agent acquisitions in the offseason, where you spend the second most money in the NFL, it's been a bunch of whiffs. And I was wrong about that. I thought the free agent class was really strong, and I thought the roster around the quarterback was a contending caliber roster, and it has turned out not to be the case. And we could be a broken record with this, but then you have all the injuries in addition to that, which then amplifies the poor drafting via the lack of depth that we have obviously seen this season. So, yeah, I think, frustration with the front office, frustration with the coaching staff. There's a lot of frustration to go around and a lot of finger pointing to go around. Generally, that comes from the fan base. Mm-hmm. What troubles me about this season is the call seems to be coming from inside the house. And it seemed to be starting before the season started. And now as we go along here and we hit 4-8 here, you start to see what appears to be finger pointing going on as anonymous sources through the media, where people are already constructing alternate histories. I found it interesting too, all the reporting right before that game and the days leading into it, where the whole thing, was it Schefter that was reporting the thing of, Kwesi, he discovered Max Brosmer, and he didn't want to, he advocated for Max Brosmer to go to the combine, but then he regretted that because other teams could discover Max Brosmer and the secret could get out. Well, then, obviously Max Brosmer ends up going undrafted, and it seems like you're sort of, I don't know another reason to sort of be saying those anecdotes right now in advance of that game, outside of being, you hope you strike gold there, and then you can point to that as a success. But again, just kind of odd storylines coming out of the team in conjunction with the all systems failure that we see on the field dang near every single week, with the exception of just a couple so far this season.
Yeah, it's so weird. It feels like everybody and their mother in that, over at TCO Performance Center was like ready to burst to the front of the line and be like, I'm the one who advocated for 12. Like I want to take credit for the success. And now that success hasn't come. Everybody's kind of like shifting. Actually, no, you step forward. You talk about how you were the one that wanted him instead of me. And you mentioned the finger pointing from the fan base. You'd imagine it's more directed towards Kwesi Adofo-Mensah than Kevin O'Connell. I mean, we've seen both of those guys, like, similar to the quarterback play. We've seen good. Like, Kwesi knows how to work a salary cap and restructure deals and whatnot. But at the same time, there is that lack of, it feels like, draft talent, being able to take guys high in the draft and then have that pay off almost immediately. Granted, he finally might have retribution on Dallas Turner, and we'll get to that. But Kevin O'Connell, we've seen him with the veteran type of quarterbacks being able to kind of rehabilitate them and prop them up. But with the rookie quarterbacks, it's now Max Brosmer after J.J. McCarthy. It seems like he struggles to cater his play calling to what some of those guys' strengths could be. There's no reason that 4th and 1 yesterday, why you're having him roll out when you have success running the ball, especially in short yardage situations. I think the stat is like 71% of the time on third to first down. They're able to pick up the conversion rate on 71% or higher. Why are you having him roll out to put the ball in the air there? It seems very stubborn. So where does your finger point to between those two guys, or is it totally away from them? For like, who's taking the most blame here?
No, I mean, they need to be way up there. Kwesi, obviously, with the failed free agent class this year, which Kwesi wanted anything but the spotlight to be shown on his draft record. And unfortunately for him, the enormous whiff that he had with the free agent class this past off season it's only amplified that. And now it puts your road kind of narrow heading into the next off season. You will have an enormous amount of draft equity, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the episode, that you're going to have to do well with. But again, that also goes back to the poor drafting thing, because when you're talking about who's coming back next year, it's like, well, one of the things that could sort of save us here is having an enormous amount of draft equity, and then we can move some money around. They are over the cap for next season right now, but you are going to be able to carry over a large amount of cap space this year that you didn't use to cover at least some of that. And then you have a lot of veterans that you're going to cut, and you're going to have restructurings, et cetera. So going up against a last place schedule next year, which is, we know that's going to happen. If you can improve that roster, you can see a path. But do you want Kwesi to preside over this offseason where, because everything hasn't gone right to this point, or because of some of the mistakes he's made in his tenure, you have to be almost perfect next year to try to turn that thing around real quick? O'Connell, he's going to get a longer leash. He deserves a longer leash. I do think this season has pointed the spotlight at his weaknesses as a coach. You have stubbornness. You have ego there. You have a guy who appears to be a little bit intractable as far as his system goes. A guy who bristled the first couple games when it was even suggested to him, when he was playing with Justin Skule as his left tackle, and he had the second-year quarterback, NFL's youngest starter at that time at quarterback, coming off a 600-plus day layoff. And the first couple games, people are like, why is there no quick concepts, right? And so O'Connell kind of bristles at that, but then it was kind of like, okay, fine, we'll add some, and then they did a little bit, but mostly what you see, it's like the screens, which, and then it's going back to the long developing stuff. Even this game, you see it's like screen pass to Jones, screen pass. I think the first 3 completions were screen passes to Jones. And then Brosmer, outside of that, his other baby's blanket obviously became TJ Hawkinson, right? And he wasn't throwing very much to the receivers. Jordan Addison was helping to convince him to stop, because of more drops out of him later on. But with where Brosmer was, you would like to, we've been advocating for this all season, but like quick slants, right? Or drags, or heck, try a pop pass or something, right? Like anything to get the ball out of the hands quick, where it's not just a straight screen, or else we go back to the drop back game. And O'Connell, for the 8th straight, 9th straight, 10th straight press conference, said the words, "Oh, we had some explosives available there that we just missed." It's like, well, yeah, when you're, this is another game you played without Christian Darrisaw, you played without Donovan Jackson, you're playing the defense that I believe after the Seahawks defense is number 1 DVOA in the NFL, very good defense, and you're on the road in one of the hardest places to play. We could use some more of those concepts too, and the quick hitters that are just, again, not the screen passes that have been a bugaboo of O'Connell's offense going back a bit. And if we had some other quick hitters, I think it would help to diversify, would certainly help the young quarterbacks in situations where they're behind the poor offensive lines. And we saw poor offensive line play again, rear its ugly head in this game. It's hard to put too much on Brosmer, even with the, and I put none on Brosmer, to be honest with you. Last week with the hype and people wanting to get excited, justifiably so, during what has been a very bleak season. And then you start seeing the tweets from the quarterback coach's brother hyping Max Brosmer, and you start to see media comments suggesting that someone in the organization is comparing him in a flattering light to the 10th overall pick the year before, JJ McCarthy. And then he goes out and doesn't play well, but it's an undrafted free agent. There was a reason that he went undrafted, and it's a poor situation as well. So O'Connell needs to fix that offense. I don't know if that's coming this year because of all the issues with the offensive line. And obviously you're still trying to get your quarterback up off the ground. That the surrounding talent on offense, it was supposed to rise that up. Again, it's not doing that at all. But yeah, just a brutal game of offensive football to watch yesterday.
I don't think we saw enough from Brosmer. Despite being put in a terrible situation, he doesn't have 2 of his normal old linemen that would greatly help him. He had a couple key drops, but it doesn't feel like we saw anywhere close to the level of play where there should be a conversation moving forward that who's going to be the quarterback. If JJ McCarthy is healthy moving forward, you start him. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, that's correct for sure. And I think more the Brosmer performance, what that does for me is like I had hoped that Brosmer would. I mean, I hoped that he would light it up, or that he would acquit
Yeah.
himself well enough that maybe
I wish we had a tougher conversation after Sunday, right?
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I guess the whole point I'm making is I don't know that Brosmer can be anything but QB3 heading into next season, right? Like in the off season, etc. I mean, most people were already advocating for the idea of adding a veteran quarterback, probably as the QB2. I know some people would prefer that that's the QB1, but you're not going to have a lot of options this offseason. There's not going to be a lot out there. The Colts are going to franchise Daniel Jones. I wouldn't pay Daniel Jones over $40 million a year anyway. Joe Shane tried that once. It didn't work out for the Giants. But, I digress. And you don't really have a lot of other options there. I certainly wouldn't be, trading a round 2 pick for a guy like Mac Jones for the right to pay him $30+ million after the one season that he's under contract left. But I do think now it's got to be, you have to sign a veteran to at least be the insurance policy, but hopefully, be a voice in that room as well, and someone where certainly for injury contingency, but also, if McCarthy next year, if he has not turned it around and continues to struggle, someone that you could then put in. I think that's going to happen? No. I think that, again, I'm very, very bullish on McCarthy going forward. Mm-hmm. To me, the entire offense looks broken this year, and any quarterback that we've seen in there, they haven't acquitted themselves well with the situation this year. But I made this point about McCarthy in the pre-draft process. It's not going to break him, right? Like, I mean, we'll see if the game can end up slowing down for him. An issue that lots of young quarterbacks have. Kevin O'Connell was talking about that at the lectern yesterday with regards to Max Brosmer. He kind of inverted the way that he said it with Brosmer. He said he was processing too quickly. It's just his eyes were darting around, and stuff like that, which you could kind of see that as well. But I would advocate for that veteran quarterback now. I don't think you can view, and I'm not going on a limb by saying this, that Brosmer could be a QB2 next year. I do hope that he can develop into that long term. But yeah, his audition here didn't go the best. But again, the circumstances weren't the best either.
In terms of just kind of the now veteran QBs that could be out there, and this one, maybe this is a bad transition, but let's just talk about the matchup yesterday, because you're facing Sam Darnold, guy who last year led you to such a prolific season. He looked good with Justin Jefferson, and he, granted, up until yesterday, it seemed like he was having maybe minus the game against the Rams. I think he threw 4 picks in that one too. He has had a really good season connecting with Jackson Smith and Jigba. But did you really have a lot of like FOMO on not having Sam Darnold watching that game yesterday? They only scored 1 touchdown. It was a rushing touchdown. He threw for 128 yards,
28.
14 for 26, 67.5 passer rating. Like it wasn't like he necessarily let the Vikings into Seattle and said like, you're missing out on the bell of the ball here. It was a very mediocre day for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, it was good to see Sam, and Sam gets the win. But the thing that I was thinking after the game, especially after seeing the quarterback ratings, people made a big deal last week, the game against Green Bay, that McCarthy's QB rating was lower than if he had spiked it every time. And then Brosmer's QB rating ends up coming in even, a step beneath that. And what I was thinking with regards to Darnold, and this is a very sad statement, but it's true. If Seattle had run the Bobby Boucher Bourbon Bowl offense that the other team ran, Red Bellew, where they just kneeled the ball every time and then punted back, Seattle would have won that game. They didn't need to play offense in that game to win it, which is just super, super duper sad. But yeah, I guess this is our transition into the Vikings defense. Mm-hmm. The Vikings defense played great. They really, really did. And it's another one you just feel horrible for them. The tackles for loss, they were getting into the backfield. They were making plays. They erased. This was shocking to me, more shocking than Sam not throwing for a lot, especially with the game script. But Jackson Smith and Jigba was a non-factor in that game. He ended up getting targeted 4 times, 2 catches for 23 yards. And for people that didn't watch the game, they'd probably be like, oh, well, it was a runaway. And then they rest their starters late. in the neutral game script early, they were having trouble. Sam was having trouble finding Jackson Smith and Jigba. So you give that to the Vikings as well. But yeah, the defense, you tip your hat to them, but wasn't much you could do here based on what your offense was doing.
I think maybe the biggest bright spot of the loss, and this is something that you pointed out, I think, on Twitter last night, which is Dallas Turner. We've seen this guy now for a season and a half, but what a player he was yesterday, getting home, forcing a lot of pressure on Sam Darnold, taking him down. I mean, is that a product of finally finding his footing, or did Brian Flores just suddenly decide, okay, now I know how to use this talented young guy, or was it more of an orchestrated thing by the defense to be okay, now we're honing in, this is the Dallas Turner game?
I think it's a combination of the two things, where both you see week by week continued developmental progression from Dallas Turner that now appears to be, I mean, I'll knock on wood before I say this, but at least in this moment, you just think of the last 3-4 games, it's starting to feel like it's kind of a hockey stick curve going up there. But I also think it's a circumstantial thing where, and I talked about this on Purple Daily like a month ago, or a little bit over a month ago, when the talk surrounding Dallas Turner and that is Dallas Turner a bust, that conversation had sort of begun. And one of the shows, like I said, 3-4 weeks ago, I sat down and I watched every snap that Dallas Turner had taken this season. And the take that I told Phil and Judd on that show was, I don't think he's playing nearly as poorly as people believe. On the film, he was getting into the backfield, and he was on the doorstep of many different, whether it's sacks, whether it's TFLs, just wasn't converting. You saw some of it in the pressure rate, but at least the flash plays as they show up in the box score, they weren't coming yet. And I did have some qualms with his game, or what I had seen on tape at that time. It was stuff like not consistently holding the edge in the run game. You would see some of that stuff, and then in coverage he looked lost. But I thought as coming forward as a pass rusher that he was playing a lot better than he was given credit for, just because the counting stats weren't there at that time. Well, lo and behold, the last 3 games, those counting stats now have shown up. The flash plays, the sizzle plays, they're showing up. Last 3 games for Dallas Turner, 15 total tackles. He's hit the quarterback 8 times, 4 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 2 passes defense, 2 forced fumbles. This past game, he was easily the bright spot of the entire team. 91.7 PFF unofficial game grade. That's like PFF does like the live grades, and then they do like their audit. So we're still right now on Monday morning waiting for the updated grades to be put out, but at least their unofficial grades, they had Dallas Turner with 91.7, 2 sacks, 2 TFLs, 2 forced fumbles, 4 stops in that game for Dallas Turner. He was a terror. They were having all kinds of issues. Their tackles were keeping Dallas Turner out of the backfield. And Sam Darnold, maybe he didn't get terribly well acquainted to Dallas Turner last year. He's just sort of a situational guy, on the team or whatever. But he learned Dallas Turner's name if he didn't already know it yesterday. It's the one thing as Viking fans we can point to is like, okay, and the fact that he's with the other first round pick in that 2024 class, the Vikings, goes without saying, absolutely need Dallas Turner as they need JJ McCarthy. They need both of them to develop into stars. Dallas Turner the last 3 weeks has given you real indications we are on that path.
So do you think moving forward here, like rest of the season, you expect him to have as much of a spotlight on the defensive side of the ball? Because, it seems like Brian Flores, week in, week out, whether or not you can criticize for the rushing game defense earlier in the season, because, like Bijan Robinson just spiked this team for a massive game when they played the Falcons. But it seems like he's still keeping up and trying to put the Vikings, in terms of what he can control, the best position to win a game. And frankly, I didn't feel like until maybe the fourth quarter yesterday that I was like, okay, this one is out of hand and they're just not going to have a chance to come back, because the defense was doing such a good job just keeping it somewhat attainable. But Dallas Turner moving forward, do you think he keeps this level of play, or do you think now teams might be able to hone in and say like, yep, 1-5, that's who we need to allocate more blocking to, and then maybe that opens up more for like a Jonathan Grenard or something like that?
Well, it's a great scenario for Dallas Turner now, because you are inevitably working across from either Van Ginkel or Jonathan Grenard, And then the defensive line has been able to get into the backfield, Jalen Redmond and et cetera, et cetera. I haven't seen Dallas Turner. I haven't watched the All-22 from yesterday, so maybe I'll knock on wood again, or I'll go back and I'll correct myself if I'm wrong. But I don't recall in my head seeing him double teamed yesterday. And how are you gonna? Right. Yeah. When on the other side, you have a stud veteran, no matter what. And then the defensive line that the Vikings have. And frankly, Dallas Turner should be single blocking in the NFL. Like, he has that kind of explosion, that kind of athleticism, and that kind of game. He's got propulsion off the snap. He has he's got like octopus arms is what I call him. And he's got a great long arm move. Basically the ability to keep distance between you and the offensive lineman. It's like keeping that distance with a long arm. It's kind of like locking the door where they just can't, or latching it where they just can't get in, and you get to dictate the whole interaction. And you see cool stuff with Dallas Turner when he's able to deploy that, both in with the pass, but in particular the run. That his long arm move is really good, but he uses the arm length to great effect as a pass rusher as well. In conjunction with that athleticism. Want to see the game fully fleshed out. I still don't know going forward, like, will Dallas Turner ever be decent in coverage? Like, that's one thing I don't know. Earlier in the season, I thought he looked lost out there. Saw multiple times where he got this was really frustrating to see, where he would kind of get confused about his zone depth or even exactly where his zone was. And then it would be the thing of, like, you'd see a running back sneak out to the flats. And then, that's sort of Dallas Turner's kind of area over there. But he is sort of crept towards the middle of the field. And now he's standing right next to another Viking zone defender. It's like, Dallas, that's not your area. Like, you're like pointing that way, man. The guy that just caught the ball, that was your, whatever. But the pass rushing thing, I think, speaks for itself. He was already good at that. I think he's going to get better now that he understands NFL speed. And the caliber of players that he's going up against. And I think the run defense, you see flashes with that. And that's the thing where I want to see as well, his game go to the next level. But the last thing I'd say is, from the Vikings perspective, we have entered draft season. It's the reason why I'm wearing my Reese's Senior Bowl hat, although this is now a collectible. It is now starting this coming season. It has become the Panini Senior Bowl. So, I'm going to hold on to this thing and in 20 years, I'll sell it on eBay or something. Yeah. But, in conjunction with that, with the team, you're thinking about the last 5 games, your guys that you're viewing as building blocks for the future, guys that you're going to rely on next season, they need to get all the playing time they can. We have talked about this with regards to JJ McCarthy until we're blue in the face, but this applies as well for, of course, guys like Dallas Turner. This past game, Dallas Turner had 47 snaps out of, I believe, a possible 67 defensive snaps. He needs to be at that percentage or higher going forward. I don't care if both Grenard and Van Ginkel are playing. You have to figure out a way to keep Dallas Turner on the field. Grenard in this game, it was questionable. The status was up in the air. Then they announced before the game, Grenard's going to play. Grenard did not play much, and he did not play well. 15 snaps for Jonathan Grenard, and his PFF. And again, this is subject to change. They're in their audit right now, but PFF had up 30, a 30.0 grade for Grenard yesterday when they tossed that up. Kevin O'Connell after the game, said that both Grenard and Josh Metellus, that for the last drive they were taken out, and he said it was non-injury related, even though both, he seemed to be indicating like the game was over at that time, and there's nothing to worry about as far as injuries that could affect their availability going forward. But he conceded that both of them have been dealing with multiple lingering issues for a while now. It's another one where, and we don't have time to get into the full audit of this thing, but the medical staff stuff has been weird this year. And maybe it's happened. Maybe it's just a, confirmation bias thing that, we're in this state where we are with this season where, you start like digging deeper into stuff and start being more skeptical about stuff. But, starting with Christian Darrisaw seemingly being rushed back, to get into training camp and have as full of a training camp as he could, but he was ahead of schedule. Turns out too far ahead of schedule to physically play. And then he missed the first couple games, and it's been stop-start ever since. You're playing, you're not playing, you're playing, you're not playing. Jonathan Grenard now, you look at the game that he had, and it's like, should he have been playing in that game? Like, I mean, can we get him closer to full health? Because he didn't look it in that one. It's just another thing to think about. But and look, I'm not suggesting that we start keeping veterans on the bench that are healthy, and do a full tank down the stretch here. But what I am suggesting is stop playing players that are clearly not 100%. The team says all the right things, right? But we have eyes, we have eyeballs, and there have been situations this year where it appeared that guys were rushed back prematurely. I could cite a couple of different ones with regards to Christian Darrisaw, and we'll end up seeing what Christian Darrisaw's status is going forward. But yeah, a disappointing year for the medical staff as it's been for the coaching staff and the front office and the players and the fan base.
You mentioned injury. Let's talk about that really quick, specifically at the running back position. Aaron Jones leaves with I believe it was a aggravated shoulder injury in the third quarter. And then Jordan Mason was removed briefly before coming back in. And then just when it got out of hand, I think they ceded the role to Xavier Scott to close out the game. But how big of a blow, and what were your takeaways from the rushing game yesterday altogether, and then now what sort of impact this could have if you're going back to just the Jordan Mason led backfield?
Yeah, I mean, at the end there, they tacked on the Vikings at a couple more yards in garbage time with the rushing game, so it didn't look as horrible as it was. There was one point during that game where, and this is when the game script was close-ish to neutral. This is when the game starts to kind of get out of hand. But I remember seeing in the box score that the Vikings had attempted 10 rushes at that time and gained 10 yards. Yeah, not the best. You had a 24-yard Jordan Mason run that gets the Vikings up to, in that game, 16 carries for 66 yards. Take that one out. Do the math. Right, with the rest of it. And you're talking about trying to help your young quarterback. But Kevin O'Connell, his response is going to be, well, without Darrisaw, without Jackson, then Ryan Kelly gets hurt, and him, it was a fourth quarter, a hip flexor. And once again, for another game, you have the MASH unit of offensive linemen, right? My friends and I's favorite, weekly game to play is who's playing what position sometimes. It's okay, this guy's out, this guy's okay. Who would play that one? Who would play that one? And then if a third guy gets knocked out, then what are they going to do? It's like this puzzle every single week that they're putting together with this offensive line because of the statuses. Disappointed, obviously, greatly disappointed with how that thing has turned out. And Will Fries, by the way, hasn't played the best, even though I'll give him the credit that he's the one that can stay on the field. But another injury to Ryan Kelly. Are we going to see Ryan Kelly again? We'll see how bad this hip flexor is. Michael Juergens, by the way, played decent coming in for him, which, I'll shout that one out as well in the snaps that he got there in the second half. You get a look at him down the stretch, or, Brendel, if the left side of your offensive line can come back, stay tuned next week for our next installment of State of the Vikings offensive line. But I do want to get a look at some of the young guys down the stretch. So an opportunity to get a look at a guy like Juergens, and especially acquit himself well there. I thought that was fine. But yeah, Aaron Jones, especially with O'Connell in the post game, explicitly describing it as a re-aggravation of that shoulder injury, it begs the question, is he going to be missing time now? Fortunately, Jordan Mason, it was just a comedy of, what else can go wrong when then they're like, oh, Jordan Mason's hurt and is leaving the field, is going to the medical tent. It's like, oh, great. Okay. So we're down to one running back too. We are, anyway. But yeah, fortunately, Jordan Mason was able to come back. So obviously if Jones has to miss time, and we'll monitor the injury status there and await any comments that we get from the staff about that here in the coming days. But at least Jordan Mason could handle the load heading into Sunday. I believe Vikings hosting Washington this coming Sunday.
Shifting focus to stuff after the games. I mean, and you kind of mentioned it too, with just they say all the right things, and they're very well PR trained over there at Vikings land. But
sure.
One guy who didn't say anything was Justin Jefferson. Didn't speak to the media at all after yesterday's loss. And I feel like Vikings fans are treated very well, and they're very fortunate having him on the team, because we look at star receivers. I mean, this is a franchise that once had Stephon Diggs, and you know how kind of outspoken he can be. You look at Philadelphia and AJ Brown and kind of what he does with reading on the sidelines, and it's like, well, what book does he have this week when things aren't going well? Justin Jefferson feels very much like a team player, a leader. He's very team friendly when it comes to keeping opinions to himself, even if it might, benefit more him personally to speak out. Now, not saying anything, choosing to not speak to the media yesterday at all. Is that concerning to you? What's your takeaway and thoughts on that?
You see some people like tweeting about it, or like some headlines, oh, Justin Jefferson leaves without talking to the media, and it's like sort of salacious like this. And sure, there's going to be people that would argue, like, no matter what, from a professional standpoint, that you should, and totally get that. Where Jefferson, as obviously the best player on the team, and the face of the franchise right now, and this sort of recurring nightmare season where every single week it's like, who's on third? It's you're getting the same questions every single time. You could quibble with Justin Jefferson's decision, but I understand it, and I don't care that he did. Like, I think about myself in like a similar situation. If it's like just over and over and over again, and it's not your fault, and then but they're asking you at some point, feel like you might say something that you would regret. And it's possible that Jefferson was in that. We don't know, right? I mean, we know that he was super duper frustrated, but honestly, if that was the case, and he felt like his frustration was such that he didn't, feel like he should be in that circumstance, I'm fine with him doing that in this instance, right? Not if this becomes a recurring thing, but as a one-off, especially after a game like that. What are you gonna say? Justin Jefferson, up until some point in the fourth quarter, I believe he had one catch for -4 yards. This is or -2 yards, or like something like that. And then he got the catch to get over the zero line there with the receiving yards. But what do you say? It's So this one, I think it's okay to excuse Mr. Jefferson from the post-game comments.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as people watching the game from their couch, I mean, it's one thing to watch the 4-hour broadcast where you see how bad it is, and then you get the close-up cuts to him late in the game, especially sitting on like a cooler alone with a panning camera, and it's just there. You can he might just be thinking about like, okay, I'm kind of hungry. What am I getting after the game? Whereas on the broadcast, they're talking about how much struggles he's going with, and the frustration has to be building. So you kind of get this like in the back of your head, you know what? Yeah, it is starting to build. I'm feeling frustrated too for him. Any sort of media thing yesterday, it felt like, and I understand he's a leader, and you're going to want to talk to him. They play once a week, so you probably should get some FaceTime with the camera. He's going to do that again midweek. He's going to do all this other stuff. Yesterday, it feels like it's a lose-lose, because either you get up there and you say the basic PR 101 of, we just got to keep our heads down and push forward. We got to work some things out, which everybody's heard. And it's interpreted, like you were saying, he's frustrated, he wants out, that type of thing. Or he does speak, and maybe it's interpreted of it comes off as poor leadership in terms of people think he's attacking the quarterback or attacking the play calling. And there doesn't feel like a way that he could have got out of that situation yesterday without coming off as maybe the bad guy, right?
I think so. I mean, like, other than just repeating all the stuff that he said before, but like, if, there's, if the media wants to, they can just keep asking you the same questions. And then that's where you fall into the thing of, if you are that level of frustrated, or, you can't really clear your head with it, where it's like, man, the fifth time I get asked that question in front of my locker after I've answered it a million times at this point in the season, like, you might get a little short. And again, what are you going to say? It's like, oh, Justin, you caught 2 balls in this game, and it was, your worst statistical game, blah, blah, blah. Like, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about losing 26-0 to Seattle? How do you feel about one of the years of your prime being totally lost? Like, it's like, okay, like, I feel like he's answered it enough to this point. And the reason the season has gone wayward, it is obviously not Justin Jefferson's fault. So it's, what do you say?
I know we got about 10 minutes left here, so let's maybe shift the focus to the one thing we can talk about with you on the show is draft pick watch. Let's how does yesterday's loss maybe impact where the Vikings go moving forward? I mean, it's a very far look out, but let's monitor that type of thing. For the visual YouTube audience here, I'm going to put up Tankathon on TV, but talk me through where the Vikings kind of sit right now and where fans can maybe expect them to land here.
Yeah, so as y'all can see, Vikings now sit at with the 11th pick if the draft was held, tonight or tomorrow. But we got some interesting things going on with it. You look at the standings there. You only have one 5-7 team in the NFL right now, that being Miami. So you have a little bit of cushion behind you. And by the way, Miami's won 3 straight games, right? So they've moved themselves out of the top 10 picks and are seeming to go the other way. But you have a little bit of protection there, whereas there's a group of teams clumped ahead of you where, as you can see, the Browns that are only one game, depending on how you want to say it, ahead of or behind the Vikings in these standings, pick 5th, right? And so you can see you start accumulating some losses. The Vikings could move up this thing really, really quickly. And this coming week, when you're hosting the aforementioned Washington Commanders, I hate to say it, but this is kind of a key game for draft pick watch, because you have Washington right now after an unfortunate last second loss for Washington. As a Vikings fan, I was up watching that Sunday night game, and it was the thing at the end, and they tried to lollipop the ball in, and the defender batted it away from Mariota. What looked like it was going to be the equalizer there to potentially win it for the Commanders, but the Broncos escape again, and because of that, Washington's sitting at 6th, but they're only, again, one game behind the Vikings for this. If you lose at home to Washington on Sunday, you now all of a sudden are jived, and you're at that point you are going to move into the top 10. We have a couple games this week as well outside of that are big draft pick positioning games. Pulling up the schedule right now for next week. The Titans, I think it was the Titans the Jets are hosting the Dolphins. So that's the line on that game is less than 3. The Dolphins are favored on the road, but the Jets are another team with 3 wins. Obviously the Vikings sitting with 4. Oh, and then the other big one, Tennessee at Cleveland, right? Cleveland, like I mentioned, Cleveland sits right now atop the 3 and 9 teams at the 5th slot. Cleveland is favored in that game by hosting the Titans 4.5 points, right? So it's the game where the odds makers are saying, Cleveland's got the best, obviously you're playing the worst team in the league. Yeah. But if Cleveland holds serve there, and the Vikings aren't catching the Titans, right, at 1-11.
Oh, chance.
Yeah, I mean, this coming Sunday, Vikings fans, we are rooting for the Browns. We are rooting for the Jets. That's what it's become. It's draft pick watch right now. So anytime I start to see an upset, we had a couple yesterday, get excited, right? Because we're wanting the Vikings to move up, and obviously we don't want to see football like we see in the last couple of weeks with the Vikings. We want to see them more competitive, and we certainly want to see the younger guys playing, and we want them to show developmental steps here down the stretch. But I also think it's super important to watch those draft pick standings, where again, Vikings right now, they've steadily been moving up this draft order as they've now taken their 4th straight loss. But now is where you can start taking bigger steps up, just because of the way that board sits. Last point I'll make about this, AJ, just for folks that don't know, the tiebreaker rules are a little bit different with the draft order, where you tie with record. It goes right to strength of schedule as the tiebreaker, but it's the inverse of tiebreakers that they use, for instance, for divisional standings or the playoffs, where the team with the hardest strength of schedule drops to the bottom of the teams that have the same record, and the teams with the easiest strength of schedule that put up the worst record against the easiest strength of schedule, they obviously go to the top. So the reason that Cleveland sits above at those other 3 and 9 teams, they have played a cumulative 480 strength of schedule winning percentage, whereas the reason the Vikings sit at the bottom of those 4 and 8 teams, 532 win percentage. So it's another thing to monitor, where the Vikings are going to lose a lot of tiebreakers against teams that they end up tying with in the record as far as the draft order goes. There are a couple of teams above them where, if they caught them, that they could win the tiebreaker, but Vikings have played a very, very good strength of schedule this year. We talked about differences between this year and last year. Strength of schedule is one that doesn't get talked about a lot that probably should. Last year's strength of schedule, you played opponents that were beneath the Mendoza line, 500 for your 17 games. This year, you're at 532 right now. And we'll see where that ends up finishing. But, I mentioned before earlier in the episode, another thing to look forward to potentially next year, getting that last place schedule. And when you see it laid out, one of these episodes we'll go through, because you can already, knowing that the Vikings are going to get finish in last place in the NFC North, we already know the 17 opponents. We don't know the dates that they'll be played. The schedule lays out. We're a long way away, but it lays out fairly advantageously when you're just looking at the teams on paper of like, man, I wish that had been the schedule this year. But just something to monitor here as we play out the string on this last season.
Yeah, and last thing before we wrap up, but like this for this draft, we're still super far out here. But as we wind down the season and kind of like we're watching where the Vikings might lay out here draft pick wise, is there a tier that you're like, okay, obviously number one pick, that's you get the full pick of the board here, but then it's like 2 through 5 is you're sitting pretty well, or where does that bump out? Like, where do you think you get the most value of jumping from 8 to 7 or 11 to 10? Where do you see the Vikings getting the most advantageous if they could move up another slot or two?
Yeah, well, first off, this coming class here is not the best draft. The 2027 one is the one that's going to be awesome. But for the Vikings, I think, in this draft class in particular, if you can get into the top 6, 7, I didn't do that because of that. But if you can get like in that range, like where a quarterback potentially could be in play for another team to give you the potential to trade down would be one possibility, but also the high-end talent of the non-quarterbacks in this class. It would give you the two options of, and I know when I talk about Kwesi trading down with draft picks that people cringe. But if you get one of those premium spots, could potentially open that up. This class coming up here, we think it's got 3 first-round quarterbacks if Dante Moore declares, and if that ends up being the case, those guys are going to go real quick, and that's why I was tossing out top 5, top 6, something like that. But that would certainly give you leverage for a potential trade down. But then the premier players at other positions. Caleb Downs is one that I'm monitoring for the Vikings, and we'll talk plenty about Caleb Downs here the next couple months. But he is your by far premier, not only safety, but also chess piece player in this coming draft class. Certainly the best defensive back, but he's one of those guys you can move him all over, and he just wrecks offensive plans. Every single play, you just kind of use him like that. But there are a couple prospects like that. But yeah, it's an interesting draft class where this draft class has shifted a lot from the preseason. When we looked at in preseason, it was like, man, the wide receiver class is not going to be very good. Maybe the quarterback class is going to be really good. The quarterback class has fallen way off. Now it looks like next year will be the good one for that one in 2027. Whereas the receiver class has all of a sudden gotten pretty good as a lot of guys have emerged. The offensive tackle class has taken a step back. A lot of the top guys, haven't done as well. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking for the Vikings. To your question, AJ, if they could get into the top 6, that's where I think that becomes a really valuable asset in this class.
All right. I know tomorrow we'll be joined by Judd Zolgad and debuting a new segment called A Modest Proposal, trying to fix the Vikings week by week. But I think coming off this loss, this is about as good of an inaugural episode of Thor Talks Purple as we could have had.
I hope everybody agrees. And with that, wrapping up our first episode of Thor Talks Purple, please don't forget to click the like button. This is the first time I feel like Phil right now. Please don't forget. He's going to have to coach me up on this. Please don't forget to click the like button below and subscribe if you haven't. And also, please give us a 5-star review. This show is on a channel that was just created. So if you can help us get the word out there on the Thor Talks Purple channel, appreciate it. 5-star review with comments, the likes and the subscriptions all help with that. So we would really appreciate it. We also very much appreciate y'all for joining us on the very first episode of Thor Talks Purple. As AJ mentioned, we will be back tomorrow with our boy, the sports dad, Judd Zulgad. Until then, we will see you tomorrow.